Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're exploring the world of dark psychology and manipulation.
Oh, a fascinating topic.
Yeah, and all based on excerpts that you've shared from Dark Psychology and Manipulation, the best mind control and persuasion techniques.
Yeah.
This book really digs into how people use psychology to get what they want, even if it means bending the rules a bit.
It's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how often these tactics just pop up in everyday life, even if we don't always recognize them.
Yeah, for sure. And right off the bat, the book defines dark psychology as using
Right.
motivation, persuasion, deception, and intimidation to get your way.
Wow.
Sounds pretty intense when you put it like that.
It can be, but
Yeah.
the book makes a really important point.
Yeah,
Not everyone who uses these tactics is a villain.
right.
Some people do it unconsciously, picking up these behaviors from their environment or even specific training programs. Think about those high-pressure sales tactics we've all encountered.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. This makes so much more sense now. But hold on, before we get too deep into the dark side, the book also points out some interesting psychological effects that we see all the time,
Right.
like the Pratfall Effect.
Yeah.
The idea that making small mistakes can actually make you more likable?
Yes.
Is that really true?
It is. And it's actually quite clever when you think about it.
Sure.
Imagine a leader who seems perfect in every way. It can be intimidating, even off-putting. But if they make a small mistake, show a bit of vulnerability, it makes them more human, more relatable. People are more likely to trust someone who seems genuine.
That's fascinating. So even something like a little slip-up can be used strategically.
Right.
What about the bystander effect? That's the one where the more people witness a problem, the less likely anyone is to help.
Right.
How does that play into manipulation?
Think about it this way. A manipulator could stage a situation where they need help, knowing that a crowd will make people feel less responsible for stepping in.
Oh.
It diffuses the pressure to act, and the manipulator might even avoid consequences because no one feels personally accountable.
Wow, that's a bit disturbing.
It's like they're using the crowd as a shield.
Exactly.
Okay, one more psychological effect I have to ask about the spotlight effect.
Okay.
This one says we overestimate how much people notice our flaws. Is that really true?
Yeah.
Because I always feel like everyone's staring at that stain on my shirt or whatever.
It's a common feeling, but the research shows that people are much less focused on us than we think. We're all kind of wrapped up in our own little worlds, but manipulators often prey on those insecurities, those fears that everyone is judging us to gain an advantage.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Okay, so the book dives into some classic manipulation tactics, and some of these feel very familiar.
Yeah.
Let's talk about playing the victim. Is that as common as it seems?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic guilt trip. A way to make the other person feel responsible for the manipulator's well-being. They'll use phrases like, "You just don't understand how much this hurts me," or "After all I've done for you," to evoke sympathy and get their way.
It's like emotional blackmail.
Yeah.
What about projecting blame? This one hits close to home. This is a classic defense mechanism, shifting responsibility and making you feel at fault, instead of owning your mistakes. A manipulator will twist the situation to make you feel like the problem. You might even start apologizing even though you've done nothing wrong.
It's so frustrating.
Right.
But I see how it works. They turn the tables so quickly you don't even know what hit you.
Exactly.
The book also mentions brandishing wrath, using anger and intimidation to get what you want.
Right.
Think about a time when you were in a disagreement and the other person suddenly started yelling. It's jarring, intimidating, and often shuts down communication. You might back down just to de-escalate the situation, even if you know you're right.
It's like they're using their anger as a weapon.
Speaking of weapons, let's talk about seduction.
Okay.
Using charm and flattery to manipulate someone, this feels like a whole other level.
It can be very effective because it plays on our desire to be liked and admired. A skilled manipulator will make you feel special, seen, and understood. They might shower you with compliments or act incredibly attentive to your needs. It can be very disarming, even when you know on some level that it's a tactic.
So they're basically creating a fantasy to lure you in.
Right.
We've covered a lot of manipulative tactics, and it's making me wonder, where's the line between persuasion and manipulation? Like, think about sales. Is a good salesperson just convincing you of a product's value, or are they using some of these sneaky psychological tricks?
That's the million-dollar question, and there are no easy answers. The book highlights the concept of free will
Right.
and whether certain tactics undermine our ability to make genuine choices Take the foot in the door technique, for example.
Oh, that's the one where they get you to agree to something small,
Uh-huh.
like signing a petition, and then
Yeah.
suddenly they're asking for a donation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've already made a small commitment, so you're more likely to agree to the larger request, or there's the door-in-the-face technique.
Fill me in because I definitely feel like I've fallen for this one.
They start with an outrageous request, something you'd never agree to. Then they hit you with a smaller actual request, which suddenly seems reasonable in comparison. You're more likely to say yes because you feel like you've already negotiated them down.
Wow, that is sneaky.
Right.
It's like they're playing mind games.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, the book then shifts gears to the more extreme end of the spectrum, brainwashing and mind control. That sounds terrifying, but is it really something we see in the real world?
It is, and it's not always as dramatic as we see in movies. The book emphasizes the element of isolation as a key factor in mind control.
So cutting someone off from their support system, like what we see in cults.
Exactly. They become dependent on the manipulator for information and validation, but it can happen in less extreme ways, like in toxic relationships, where one person tries to control the other's social interactions and access to information.
That makes it much more insidious because it's happening within a relationship that's supposed to be based on love and trust.
Right.
The book also mentions criticism as a tool of manipulation.
Right. Constant criticism erodes the target's self-esteem, making them more susceptible to the manipulator's influence. They might start believing they need the manipulator's approval and guidance to function.
It's like they're being chipped away at until they have no confidence left. What about social pressure?
Social pressure is incredibly powerful. Manipulators will often use the group to enforce conformity and punish anyone who deviates from the accepted norms. Think about peer pressure, but amplified to an extreme level.
It's like being trapped in an echo chamber where everyone is reinforcing the same message. What about repetition? We touched on that earlier.
Right. Repetition plays a huge role in brainwashing. The more you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it, especially if it comes from a source you trust or is reinforced by the group.
It's like they're trying to wear down your resistance through sheer repetition. It's scary to think how effective these techniques can be, especially when combined.
Yeah.
The book also introduces the dark triad. Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Are these personality types always manipulative?
They're not necessarily manipulative in every situation, but these traits are often associated with manipulative behavior. Machiavellianism is all about being cunning and strategic, using others to achieve your goals.
Okay.
Narcissism is characterized by a need for admiration and a lack of empathy for others, and psychopathy is marked by a lack of remorse, superficial charm, and often antisocial behavior.
So it's like a recipe for manipulation, a lack of empathy, a focus on personal gain, and a willingness to use any means necessary to get what you want.
It's a potent combination, and it's important to be aware of these traits because they can be very difficult to spot in the early stages of a relationship.
So we need to be extra vigilant, especially when meeting new people. It sounds like we need to develop some serious defenses against all of this manipulation.
We do, and luckily there are ways to protect ourselves. One of the most powerful tools we have is emotional intelligence.
Okay, let's talk about that. What is emotional intelligence, and how can we use it to shield ourselves from these dark psychology tactics?
Well, the book dives into how these emotional manipulators operate.
Oh, okay.
It actually gives some concrete examples.
Like what kinds of things? I'm all ears.
Well, it talks about how manipulators try to undermine your confidence in the truth itself.
Oh, wow.
They're masters at twisting facts, gaslighting you, and making you question your own sanity.
Gaslighting, that's a serious accusation. What does that look like in a real relationship?
They might deny things that actually happen, make you feel like you're imagining things, or even accuse you of being the manipulative one.
Oh, wow.
It's a way of shifting the focus and making you doubt your own perceptions.
That is so messed up.
Right.
It sounds like a recipe for driving someone crazy. Does the book give any other red flags to watch out for?
It also highlights the mismatch between words and actions. They might shower you with compliments and promises, but their behavior tells a completely different story. It's all about creating a facade of sincerity while hiding their true intentions.
So it's like they're laying a trap with all those sweet words.
Exactly. And then there's the classic guilt tripping.
Oh, I know this one all too well. What are some signs that someone is using guilt to manipulate you?
They'll make you feel bad for speaking up, setting boundaries, or even just for having needs. It's like you're being unreasonable or demanding just for wanting basic respect.
Right.
They might say things like, if you really loved me, you would, or after all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. It's all about making you feel indebted to them and responsible for their emotional well-being.
Ugh, that is so toxic.
Right.
It's like they're holding your emotions hostage. Does the book talk about any other common tactics?
It mentions playing the victim, which we touched on earlier. Nothing is ever their fault. They'll always find someone else to blame, whether it's you, their boss, their ex, or even society as a whole.
They're masters at deflecting responsibility. Is there anything about how they approach relationships?
Yes, the book actually points out that emotional manipulators often move way too fast in relationships.
Really? That's interesting. What's the thinking behind that?
It's like they're trying to create a false sense of intimacy by skipping all the normal stages of getting to know someone.
Mm.
They might overshare personal information too early or try to push the relationship forward at an uncomfortable pace.
It's like they're trying to trap you before you have time to think clearly.
Exactly. And this fast-forward approach can leave you feeling overwhelmed and confused. You might even start questioning your own instincts because things are moving so quickly.
It sounds like being in a relationship with an emotional manipulator would be incredibly draining.
The book actually describes them as emotional black holes, which is a very apt description.
Whoa, an
Huh.
emotional black hole. What does that even mean?
They're constantly sucking the energy out of everyone around them with their negativity and drama. It's like they need to feed off the emotional energy of others to sustain themselves.
And you're left feeling depleted and exhausted.
Exactly. And they always seem to have some sort of crisis going on that requires your immediate attention,
So you're constantly putting their needs before your own.
right? It's all about keeping you focused on their needs and preventing you from attending to your own. They're experts at creating a sense of urgency and making you feel like you're the only one who can help them.
It's like being caught in a constant whirlwind of their drama. Are there any other patterns we should be aware of?
Yes. The book talks about their tendency to be martyrs.
Oh,
They'll volunteer to help you with something and then make a huge show of how much of a burden it is for them.
That is so passive aggressive. Like they're doing you a favor, but making you pay for it with guilt.
Exactly. It's all about making you feel guilty for even asking for help in the first place.
What about that one-upping thing some people do? Is that a form of manipulation?
Absolutely. No matter what you're going through, they've always got it worse. It's a way of minimizing your feelings and making you feel like your problems aren't important. They're basically turning every conversation into a competition for who has suffered the most.
It's like they're competing for the most miserable award.
Exactly. And the book mentions another important red flag, their uncanny ability to press your buttons.
Oh, yeah. It's like they have a sixth sense for knowing exactly what will trigger you.
Right. They learn your weaknesses, your insecurities, and your past traumas, and then use them against you to get what they want. It's a very insidious form of manipulation.
It sounds like emotional manipulators are masters at playing mind games. This is all pretty heavy stuff. Does the book offer any advice on how to deal with these emotional vampires?
It does, and the first tip is surprisingly simple. Avoid trying to reason with them.
Why not? Isn't communication always the answer?
It is in healthy relationships, but emotional manipulators aren't interested in logic or fairness. They'll just twist your words and use your attempts at communication against you.
So it's like talking to a brick wall.
Exactly.
You're never going to get through to them.
The book recommends focusing on their actions rather than their words.
Okay.
Pay attention to what they do, not what they say.
That makes sense. Actions speak louder than words, as they say.
Right. And if they make a promise, hold them to it. Don't let them weasel out of their commitments with excuses or guilt trips. Call them out on their inconsistencies and make it clear that you're not going to be manipulated.
That's good advice. What about when they start getting all dramatic and martyry? How do you handle that?
Call them out on their behavior, but do it in a calm and assertive way. Don't let them derail the conversation or make it about you or your supposed flaws. Remember, you're not responsible for their feelings.
That's a tough one, but it's so important to remember.
Right.
We can't control how other people feel, but we can control how we react to them.
Right. And if their negativity is becoming too much to handle, the book suggests setting some boundaries.
Like limiting your contact with them or refusing to engage in their drama.
Exactly. You have the right to protect your own emotional well-being. And finally, the book emphasizes the importance of trusting your gut.
That inner voice that tells you when something's not right.
Exactly. If you're feeling manipulated or uncomfortable in a situation, don't ignore those feelings. Trust your intuition and take steps to protect yourself. You don't have to stay in a situation that feels toxic or draining.
This is All such great advice. So we focus mainly on emotional manipulation, but I know the book also touches on some broader mind control techniques that are used in cults, propaganda, and even toxic relationships. Are those similar to what we've been talking about?
There are some overlaps, but these techniques tend to be more systematic and insidious. The book highlights a few key elements that are common to mind control.
What are those key elements? I'm genuinely curious. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but my head is spinning after all that.
Yeah?
We've talked about manipulation tactics, mind control, even dark seduction.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It is a lot, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the darkness we've uncovered.
Right.
But it's important to remember that knowledge is power.
Oh,
By understanding these tactics, we're better equipped to spot them and protect ourselves.
that's a good point. It's like shining a light on the shadows, making them less scary somehow. But even with all this knowledge, how do we actually stay grounded and avoid falling prey to manipulation?
The book circles back to emotional intelligence, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
It's really our strongest defense against these dark tactics.
Okay, so remind me, what are the key components of emotional intelligence?
It's about being self-aware, understanding your own emotions, being able to read other people's emotional cues, and being able to manage your emotional responses. Effectively, the book actually gives some specific tips for strengthening those emotional intelligence muscles.
I'm all about practical tips, so lay it on me. What does the book suggest?
The first step is practicing mindfulness. That means paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations in the present moment without judgment. It's about tuning into your inner landscape.
So basically, becoming more aware of what's going on inside our heads and bodies, how does that help with manipulation?
When you're more in tune with yourself, you're more likely to notice when something feels off. When someone is pushing your buttons or when a situation is triggering an unhealthy emotional response, it's like having an early warning system.
That makes sense. It's like you're more in control of your emotional reactions because you're not caught off guard. What other tips does the book give?
It recommends learning to identify your emotional patterns. What kinds of situations make you angry, sad, or anxious? What are your typical reactions to those situations? Once you understand your triggers, you can start to develop healthier coping mechanisms.
So instead of reacting impulsively, you can take a step back and choose a more constructive response.
Exactly. You might realize that you tend to shut down emotionally when you're feeling overwhelmed,
Right.
or maybe you lash out at others when you're feeling insecure. By recognizing these patterns, you can start to break free from them and choose a different path.
It's like you're rewriting your emotional script. What about empathy? Does the book talk about that?
Empathy is a crucial part of emotional intelligence. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, even if you don't agree with them or condone their actions.
So it's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing the world from their perspective. How does that protect you from manipulation?
When you can connect with someone on an emotional level, you're less likely to be swayed by their attempts to manipulate you.
Okay.
You can see their motivations more clearly, and you're less likely to take their words or actions personally.
It's like you're building a bridge of understanding rather than letting them build a wall of manipulation.
Exactly. And finally, the book emphasizes the importance of practicing assertiveness.
Assertiveness. That's a word I hear a lot, but I'm not always sure what it means in practice.
It means standing up for yourself, expressing your needs and boundaries clearly and respectfully. It's not about being aggressive or demanding. It's about finding that balance between being passive and overly aggressive.
So it's about advocating for yourself while still respecting the other person. That sounds like a tricky balance to strike.
It can be, but it's a skill that can be learned and developed over time. The more you practice assertiveness, the more confident and empowered you'll become in your interactions with others.
So by honing these emotional intelligence skills,
Yeah.
mindfulness, self-awareness, empathy, and assertiveness,
Right.
we're essentially building up our defenses against manipulation.
Exactly. All of these skills help us navigate the complexities of human relationships with more awareness, compassion, and resilience.
Yeah.
We're less likely to be swayed by emotional appeals, guilt trips, or other manipulative tactics.
I love that emotional intelligence as our superpower in the fight against manipulation.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the dark side of psychology, what are your biggest takeaways? What stands out to you the most?
For me, it's the power of awareness. We can't protect ourselves from something we don't even know exists. By understanding these tactics, we can start to see them at play in our own lives and the lives of others. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses that allows us to see the world in a whole new way.
It's like those movies where the hero suddenly sees all the hidden codes and messages they were missing before.
Exactly. And that awareness
Hmm.
empowers us to make more conscious choices about the people we interact with,
Yeah.
the situations we put ourselves in. It's about protecting our energy and our well-being.
It's like we're taking back our power, right? We're not just passive recipients of other people's agendas. We're active participants in shaping our own experiences.
Exactly. And for me, the other big takeaway is the importance of emotional intelligence, which we've been talking about. It
Yeah.
really is our best defense against manipulation.
Because it's about more than just recognizing the tactics. It's about having the self-awareness and the emotional skills to navigate those situations effectively.
Right. It's about knowing ourselves, understanding our emotions, and being able to regulate our responses in a way that protects our well-being.
And the great thing is emotional intelligence is a skill that can be learned and developed over time.
Absolutely.
It's not something we're born with. It's something we can cultivate through practice and self-reflection. So it's never too late to start strengthening our emotional IQ. What's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this deep dive?
I hope they'll walk away feeling more empowered to navigate the complexities of human relationships with awareness, compassion, and resilience. I hope they'll feel equipped to spot manipulation, set healthy boundaries, and prioritize their own well-being.
And I hope they'll remember that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope for genuine connection and authentic love.
Beautifully said. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep choosing love over fear.
This has been your deep dive into dark psychology and manipulation. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic. But until then, stay curious, stay empowered, and trust your gut.
And remember what stood out to you from all of this. Which techniques have you maybe encountered in your own life? Think about that. And if you want to dive deeper into a specific aspect of dark psychology, let us know. We're always up for another deep dive.